Hey guys, tonight we're crawling into the dim, smoky world of a Viking Longhouse, where personal space is a myth, beds are made of hay and hope, and if you make it to morning without frostbite or goat-related injury, congratulations, you're basically a Norse hero. Picture this, you blink awake in total darkness. The only thing you can see is the vague reddish pulse of embers from a hearth that never quite stops smoldering. There's a smell, burnt wood mixed with wet wool and... Is that cow breath? Yes, it is. And it's less than a foot from your face. You're on your side, curled up like a human pretzel, clutching a rough woolen blanket that smells suspiciously like smoked herring and somebody else's sweat. Welcome to the Viking Longhouse. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's oddly comforting to see who else is lying in the dark with a cat on their chest. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying flat, or rather mostly flat. The bed is less bed and more slightly less muddy corner of the floor. It's covered with straw, though calling it bedding feels generous. The straw is mixed with dried reeds and what might be leftover hay from the goat's last dinner, and beneath that, just the hard-packed dirt of the longhouse floor. It's cold and uneven, like sleeping on a history textbook that's been frozen. The fire in the center of the longhouse is down to embers. It crackles occasionally, just enough to remind you that you could be warm. If only you were important enough to sleep closer to it. You, my friend, are near the wall, which is to say, you're under a roof made of overlapping planks and turf, and that roof is now dripping, slowly, rhythmically, onto your forehead. Your eyes adjust to the gloom. There's a soft silhouette across from you. A person, or maybe a large sheep wearing a cloak. Hard to tell at this angle. You shift slightly and immediately regret it. Your blanket pulls tighter around your neck, and something pokes into your spine. A bone, a rock, a spoon someone forgot to collect after dinner. Honestly, any of those options feel possible. There's no privacy here. No walls, no rooms. The longhouse is one big open space, stretching maybe 25 meters long and 5 meters wide, give or take. It's like a barn that gave up pretending to be a house halfway through construction. And in many ways, that's exactly what it is. The humans live here, yes, but so do the animals. You hear a snort from somewhere near your feet, a real one. Then the warm, moist sensation of breath on your toes. The family's cow, known fondly as Milk Legs, is sharing your sleeping quarters. She's snuggled in for the night just like you are, ruminating gently and releasing the occasional grassy belch into the air. You try not to breathe through your nose. A child coughs somewhere nearby, a harsh, bark-like sound, the kind that echoes off wooden beams and burrows into your dreams. Someone else shifts, triggering a small avalanche of straw. A baby cries out, then settles again. In the longhouse, your dreams don't end when you wake up. They just keep playing, but with livestock sound effects. Historians still argue whether families brought animals inside purely for warmth, or whether it was also for protection, companionship, or just pure necessity. Whatever the reason, tonight you are absolutely sleeping in a barn that happens to have people in it. And honestly, the cow might have the better spot. You're still tired, but sleeping is tricky here. The smoke from the hearth doesn't have a chimney to escape through. Instead, it floats lazily through the rafters before eventually oozing out gaps in the roof. In the meantime, it coats everything and everyone in a thin, gritty haze. Your lungs have officially joined the construction crew of your body, laying down a new soot layer. Cough, cough. Viking life is not for the asthmatic, but you do drift, eventually. It's not exactly sleep, it's more like a fugue state. You hover just above unconsciousness, rocked by the warmth of shared body heat and the kind of exhaustion that only comes from spending your entire day hauling water, chopping wood, and trying not to get trampled by pigs. Your dreams are weird tonight. There's something about being in a Viking longhouse that makes the mind wander into strange territories. You dream of wolves with wings, of boats that fly, of herring that sing lullabies. Probably the mead from dinner. Or maybe it's the fact that you're sleeping directly next to your Uncle Sven, who snores like someone trying to choke a war horn. A tiny itchy movement near your scalp. You reach up and scratch instinctively. Head lice? Possibly. Shared bedding wasn't just a bonding experience, it was a full ecosystem. Archaeologists have found ancient combs with rows of tiny grooves, presumably for night removal. And while the Norse were actually pretty fastidious about grooming, the lice, like the rats, were just part of the furniture. At some point, someone sits up and groans. Another person farts loudly and unapologetically. The cow shifts and lies back down with a heavy thud. The fire spits once, sending a tiny spark into the air. It lands on someone's cloak, who doesn't notice. And you exhale slowly. You're still here, still alive. A little smoke dried, a little bruised from the hard ground, but alive. That's one night in the Viking Longhouse, and morning is still hours away. You're not sure how long you've been lying there, eyes half-lidded, blinking through the haze of sleep and wood smoke, but eventually your body insists, get up or at least roll over before one side fuses to the dirt. You groan, quietly, because no one wants to be the person who wakes the entire longhouse, and begin the gentle, awkward process of untangling yourself from your blanket, your neighbors, and the creeping stiffness of sleeping like a salted fish on a lumpy floor. Welcome to the Viking Longhouse layout, a marvel of functional, communal misery. It's a single long rectangle, its walls built from thick timber planks stacked like cold pancakes, sometimes insulated with turf, moss, or whatever material looks soft enough to cram into a gap. There's no wallpaper, just beams, soot, and the occasional clump of straw wedged into a crack to stop the wind from whispering secrets down your neck. Your first task this morning? Orientation. You shuffle slowly through the gloom, trying to figure out which end of the house is the exit, and which is just a particularly shadowy livestock pile. It's not easy. There are no windows, just a few smoke holes near the roof that are theoretically for ventilation, but mostly just let in cold drafts and confused birds. The darkness is complete, except for the low, ember glow of the central hearth and a few slivers of pale light from the gaps in the roof. You step forward carefully, feet padding across the packed dirt or past slumbering forms bundled in furs and cloaks. There's a whisper of snoring, a few soft mutters in Old Norse, possibly curses, and the unmistakable crunch of your heel landing in something vaguely warm and definitely not straw. Let's be honest, the Viking Longhouse is part home, part livestock motel, and part social experiment in close quarters survival. There are no bedrooms. Instead, the family, and possibly 2 or 3 other families, all sleep in semi-designated zones along the walls, divided by low wooden platforms or benches. The animals usually stay at one end. Usually. You've noticed the animals don't always follow zoning regulations. The goat likes to wander. The longhouse might hold anywhere from 8 to 20 people, depending on the wealth of the family and how many cousins have shown up unannounced for winter. It's like a sleepover that never ends, and there's no TV, no snacks, and definitely no escape. In the center of the house runs a long, narrow hearth, which acts as the communal kitchen, heater, light source, and ceremonial fire pit. It's also a trip hazard. If you forget it's there in the dark, you risk face planting into a skillet full of last night's fish stew. Or worse, the cold ashes of disappointment. Historians still debate how strictly these spaces were organized, whether there were clear rules about who got to sleep where, or if it was more of a find a spot and defend it approach. Some sagas suggest elder members or honored guests got prime spots near the hearth, while others hint at a kind of sleep-based hierarchy, where the draftier and smellier the corner, the lower your status. Right now, you suspect you're at the bottom of that ladder, wedged between the door and the family goose, whose beady eyes never close. You pause to stretch, arms rising stiffly above your head, and crack your neck to one side. A creaky beam overhead joins in sympathetically. You inhale deeply and immediately regret it. The air smells like a blend of wood smoke, wet wool, sour ale, and just the faintest top note of sheep dung. Oh, de Norseman, your host's family has been living in this longhouse for generations. The timbers are seasoned with time, smoke, and possibly the occasional spilled mead. Some of the structural beams are carved with runes, though you can't tell if they're spiritual, decorative, or someone's attempt to curse the rat problem. You take a few more tentative steps forward, and pass what appears to be a semi-private alcove formed by hanging woven cloth. Inside is a bundle of furs you assume is the matriarch, still asleep, mouth open slightly as she breathes rhythmically. She probably gets one of the warmer spots, a little closer to the hearth, a little further from the goat. The hearth itself is just embers now, but someone will be up soon to stoke it. The fire never truly dies in a Viking home. It's the heart of the household, the place where food is cooked, stories are shared, and occasionally socks are dried. It's also your only source of warmth, light, and hope during the dark, never-ending winters. You stumble over a loose plank and almost land face first into a heap of fishing nets, which, by the way, are also stored inside. Because in the Viking Longhouse, space is multifunctional. Your living room is your kitchen, your pantry, your wardrobe, your storage unit, your barn, and yes, your bedroom. Multi-purpose is an understatement. Modern zoning codes would faint at the sight of it. As you right yourself, something brushes your arm. You freeze. It's just a fur hanging from a low peg. Maybe from a bear, or a very large angry dog. Either way, it's not something you want falling on your face at 2 a.m. The longhouse creaks again. Wood expands and contracts with the cold, groaning softly like an old man getting out of bed. You hear distant movement, maybe someone waking up to tend the fire, or a particularly motivated chicken beginning her morning routine early. You crouch down and brush your fingers across the floor. It's damp in places, cold in others, and deeply textured with the imprint of hundreds of feet, paws, and hooves. This is living history, quite literally. And just when you think you found the door, it's not. It's a grain bin. You apologize quietly to the sack of barley and turn around. Eventually, you do find the door, or at least, the plank that serves as one. It's bolted shut against the cold, and a fur pelt hangs over it like a curtain to block out drafts. You pull it aside slightly and peek out. A gray light is beginning to seep across the icy landscape. The world is still half asleep, and so are you. You shuffle back from the door, fur curtain falling into place behind you like a soggy theater drape. The longhouse is still groaning, wooden timbers adjusting to the cold like a spine popping into place, but otherwise, the household remains asleep, sort of. There's a chorus of snuffling, creaking, and occasional muttered curses from people rearranging their limbs and possibly dreaming about turnips again. Now that you've orientated yourself, it's time to reevaluate your bed. Using the term bed here is, of course, extremely charitable. You crouch, tug at the sad mound of straw you curled up on, and watch as it attempts to collapse into dust before your eyes. It's more of a suggestion of comfort than an actual sleeping surface, like if someone whispered mattress and then handed you a flattened scarecrow. You lower yourself back down slowly, painfully. Your hips protest. Your spine sounds like someone stepping on gravel. And your blanket, which might be half a wool cloak, half a repurposed curtain, does nothing to cushion your return to the floor. It's lumpy, itchy, and heavy in a way that suggests it may be retaining moisture from last week's stew accident. The straw pokes you in 6 different directions at once. Some of it is still vaguely green and fragrant, which is probably a win. Other parts, they smell like fermented barley and shame. There's a reason Viking sagas never include poetic descriptions of bedding. Historians agree that Viking sleeping arrangements were, let's say, minimalist. You might get a thin straw mattress atop a wooden frame if you were lucky or moderately important. The more modest accommodations, like yours, are essentially dirt, but less cold. Over you is the aforementioned cloak-blanket hybrid. It smells faintly of sheep and smoke and has the delightful texture of sandpaper dipped in grease. You tug it up around your shoulders and immediately discover a burr nestled against your collarbone. Lovely. And then there's the warmth, or lack thereof. Despite sharing this space with 20 people and a few farm animals with internal furnaces, it is not warm. Not really. The warmth from bodies and the fire travels, but slowly, like gossip in a town with bad reception. The spot you sleep in, over by the wall, is like a fridge that occasionally farts in your direction. A cold draft snakes under your blanket, tickling your ankles with Arctic enthusiasm. You curl tighter. Your knees now firmly occupy the same breathing space as your nose. Someone steps over you, muttering something that sounds like, "Who put a leg here?" You grunt apologetically and scoot half an inch to the left, into a slightly colder patch of straw. Let's talk pillows. You don't have one. No one does, really. Unless they've fashioned one out of bundled rags or folded tunics, most people just use their arm, or someone else's arm if relationships permit. You try using your rolled up cloak, but it immediately unfurls like a Viking flag of disappointment. You settle for your own arm, which promptly falls asleep under your head. So, at least part of you is well rested. You think about fluffing the straw. That might help, right? You give it a hopeful pat and dust billows up like a tiny mushroom cloud. You cough. Somewhere nearby, a hen clucks in protest. Your bed has successfully fought back. A small movement near your toes. You freeze just for a second, and then, yes, there it is again. Scritch, scritch. It's either a mouse investigating your foot or the world's most dedicated flea. Either way, you adjust the blanket, tuck it tighter, and whisper, "Not tonight, Helga," to whatever it was. Quirky fact, archaeologists have uncovered Viking lice combs, often made of bone or antler, delicately carved and clearly well used. Cleanliness was important, yes, but so were infestations. They weren't contradictions, they were roommates. Just like you and Bjorn, the child who keeps inching into your straw pile and seems to be using your ribs as a pillow now. You attempt to shift him back with the delicacy of someone disarming a goat-shaped bomb. But no, Bjorn is an immovable force, wrapped in a fur so large he looks like a miniature bear carcass. And so you lay still again, staring up at the longhouse ceiling. It's not very high. Thick beams run overhead, blackened with soot from countless years of fire and stories. You trace the lines with your eyes, looking for patterns. You find none, just age. Age and the faint echo of thousands of nights like this, filled with aching joints, muted coughs, and dreams of softer hay. Historians still argue whether people in Viking societies had consistent sleeping arrangements or rotated them based on season, status, or practicality. Some sources suggest certain family members always had the same spot. Others imply that people just slept wherever they fell, provided it wasn't directly in the goat's path. There's something humble about it, something grounding. You're not sleeping in isolation. You're part of a quilt of humans, stitched together with necessity, familiarity, and the mutual understanding that everyone snores, and no one gets to complain. Above your head, the beam creaks. You wonder if it's the wind, or maybe the weight of the sod roof shifting under frost. Outside, the cold presses against the walls like a patient thief. But here, in the cocoon of scratchy blankets and straw that stinks of Viking ambition, you're safe. Uncomfortable, sure. Slightly itchy, always. But safe. You try to shift again. Your hip finds a fresh rock. Of course it does. You sigh. The longhouse exhales with you. This is where you sleep. Not because it's luxurious, but because it's life. Real, itchy, drafty, mildly rodent-infested life. And weirdly, you kind of love it. The longhouse begins to stir, not in a sudden, jarring way, but like a bear waking up mid-hibernation to scratch its belly and mutter about the cold. A few coughs echo softly. There's the rustle of someone scratching their beard. A sheep bleats from the far end. And someone, possibly Uncle Torvald, lets out a sigh so dramatic you'd think he was starring in a Norse tragedy. But you? You're still trying to process the fact that you, an allegedly modern human, just spent the night sleeping next to a chicken and a child who may or may not have kicked you in the spleen at 3 a.m. You feel gritty. Your mouth tastes like regret and smoke. Your face is sticky in one spot and numb in another. And your back? Your back feels like you were used as a cutting board for turnip prep. You stretch, arms stiff, and sit up carefully. Immediately your hip complains. You look down at the straw bedding, which has, overnight, compressed into what could be mistaken for an archaeological layer of sadness. Let's talk about the sleeping company, shall we? The Viking Longhouse was communal living at its most intense. You didn't have your own room, much less your own bed. Privacy? That's a future problem. Right now, you're sharing a space with an entire extended family and at least 2 species of domestic animals. Across from you, snuggled into a pile of furs, is your cousin's wife's sister, mouth open, snoring lightly. To your left is a teenager who may or may not have spent last night sneaking extra ale. He's drooling, very actively. Nearby, you hear the unmistakable flutter of feathers and the odd cluck of a chicken who seems personally offended by the concept of dawn. And then there's the cow. Yes, the cow. She's been here all night, adding her own ambiance to the sleeping arrangement. She's snoring, too, in a bovine sort of way. Low, rhythmic exhalations that somehow make your blanket vibrate. She smells like hay and comfort and last summer's mud. Her name, as you recall from yesterday's introduction, is something impressive like Stormhoof, but you're pretty sure she answers to Moo. Historians still debate how common it was for animals to actually sleep inside the Longhouse. Some argue that livestock were only brought in during the harshest winters for warmth and protection. Others suggest that in smaller settlements, particularly in Iceland and rural Norway, cohabitation with cows, sheep, and chickens was routine, less a novelty and more a logistical necessity. You glance toward the door. It's still closed, fur curtain hanging limp. No fresh air is coming in yet, which means the air inside the Longhouse has officially marinated. It's a rich stew of sleep breath, animal funk, stale beer vapors, and something disturbingly meaty. Possibly yesterday's stew still lurking somewhere behind a bench. Despite all of this, there's a strange comfort in the closeness. You're never alone, whether you want to be or not. The child, Bjorn, is now awake and staring at you. He says nothing, just stares, like a tiny Viking judge evaluating your soul. Then, without warning, he plops down next to you and begins chewing on what appears to be a raw turnip. Breakfast of champions. You try to smile. It comes out as a twitch. He doesn't blink. There's a soft clatter near the fire pit. Someone's already up and trying to reignite the hearth. You see a hand, wrinkled, steady, toss a few dry twigs onto the glowing coals. A gentle puff of breath follows, and soon the embers respond with a crackle of life. Flames rise, small but warm. You feel the tiniest kiss of heat reach your numb toes. It's bliss. Near the fire, an older woman begins preparing something in a pot, possibly porridge, possibly boiled sadness. It's too soon to tell. Meanwhile, the rest of the household wakes up in waves. A teenager mumbles something incoherent, throws a cloak over his face, and tries to pretend the day isn't happening. An elder scratches himself with the confidence of someone who owns 0 undergarments, and someone else sneezes violently enough to scare a chicken into flight. Feathered chaos ensues. You slowly rise to your feet, carefully, like someone exiting a hammock made of knives. Every joint pops. Your knees make a noise like frozen rope, but you're upright, and that's a start. You shuffle toward the fire, hands outstretched like a pilgrim seeking warmth and redemption. You pass a pile of boots, a wooden comb, and what you hope is a dried fish and not a misplaced sock. It's hard to tell. As you settle by the fire, the warmth seeps into your bones. You exhale. The smoke curls up around you, catching the rising light. Everything is tinged with amber. Dust motes swirl in the air like tiny spirits. And then, clang. A pot lid drops. Someone swears under their breath. The cow farts audibly. Welcome to the Viking morning. Despite the chaos, there's rhythm here. Familiarity. People know their place, their tasks, their blankets. It's like a strange symphony composed of snorts, firewood, and unbrushed hair. And yes, it's rough. You're itchy. You smell like a wool rug that lost a fight. But you're part of something, this messy, smoky, tangled web of Viking family life. You accept a mug of something hot from the old woman. It might be broth, it might be thin beer. It's warm, and that's what matters. You sip. It tastes like old wood and comfort. Bjorn is still watching you. You raise your mug in his direction. He blinks once, then returns to gnawing his turnip. You're not sure if that's approval or a challenge. Either way, the Longhouse is awake now, and you've officially survived the night, with only minimal chicken trauma. Of course, surviving the night isn't the hard part. It's surviving the needs that come during the night that separate the seasoned from the slightly damp. Because let's talk about what happens when nature calls in the middle of a Viking winter. You're lying in the dark, wrapped like a cinnamon roll in your itchy, goat-scented blanket. All is quiet, except for the snoring, the wheezing, and the cow dream mooing. But then, your bladder whispers, just a suggestion at first, a polite nudge. You ignore it. 10 minutes later, it escalates. And now you're facing the ultimate medieval dilemma. Do you get up and face the frosty unknown, or do you attempt the highly risky sleep it off strategy and hope your subconscious can convince your kidneys to hold the line until morning? You choose bravery, poorly. With a groan muffled into your elbow, you sit up, limbs stiff, and glance around the longhouse. It's still mostly asleep. You shuffle like a burglar toward the far wall, blanket still wrapped around you like a cloak of shame. Your destination? The night bucket. Yes, there is no restroom, no outhouse, just a wooden pail sitting in a corner, probably behind a modest partition, possibly just behind a strategically placed goat. This is the family's nighttime solution. If you're lucky, it's been emptied recently. If not, well, let's just say you're about to get a crash course in communal living boundaries. You crouch over the bucket, cold air tickling places that have no business being tickled at this hour, and you attempt to be quick, quiet, and emotionally distant from what's happening. Because this is not dignified. This is not the romantic Viking image you imagined, storming a battlefield with a braided beard and a horned helmet, which, side note, they didn't wear. No, this is squatting in a smoke-filled barn at 3:47 a.m., hoping a chicken doesn't make eye contact. Historians still debate exactly how Vikings handled sanitation indoors. Some argue for chamber pots. Others mention designated corners of the longhouse that were used and later scooped out and thrown into the midden heap outside. But one thing is certain, it wasn't glamorous. Privacy was minimal. Comfort, non-existent. And hand-washing? A nice idea. You finish your tragic mission and tiptoe back to your corner of straw, doing your best not to disturb the snoring pile of humanity. You return to your bed, only to find that Bjorn has rolled into your spot, mouth open, hands clutching your blanket like it's the prized loot of a successful raid. You consider waking him. You consider gently reclaiming your turf. You also consider crawling into the goat stall and just emotionally relocating. Eventually, you nudge him with a toe. He grumbles but doesn't move. You tug your end of the blanket. It shifts slightly. You lie back down, half covered, half defeated, and all too aware that your feet are now sticking out into what feels like the Arctic tundra. Sleep doesn't come quickly. Your nose is cold. One foot is warm. The other is damp. You try to rearrange the straw for comfort, but it's somehow gotten lumpier, as if it aged overnight into Hayes' crankier uncle. You sigh. Somewhere in the darkness, the cow sighs too. Solidarity. You start to drift again, hovering in that lovely, hazy realm between consciousness and fever dream. But then, scratch, scratch. Nope, not again. This time, it's near your shoulder. You swat gently. A mouse? A particularly tenacious flea? Or maybe the spirit of a long-dead Viking who's annoyed you stole his spot? Either way, the moment passes, the scratching fades, and you slip, finally, back into sleep. In your dream, you're on a ship. It's sailing across a calm fjord. The sun is shining, your cloak is clean, and there are 0 animals anywhere near your feet. Bliss. Then, in the dream, a chicken flies by and screams your name. You wake up, of course you do. Bjorn is now sitting on your legs, wearing your cloak like a superhero cape and chewing what may be last night's meat scrap. You groan. You snore like a dying ox. He informs you cheerfully. You stare. He stares back. Then he toddles off, triumphant, dragging your dignity with him like a sled. You sit up fully. The longhouse is brighter now. The fire has been rekindled. You hear more voices. There's activity. Someone is sharpening a blade. Someone else is ladling porridge into carved wooden bowls. And in the corner, the bucket has been emptied, replaced with a clean one, or cleanish. Let's not get carried away. This is daily life. Every morning, someone's job is to carry the night bucket out into the cold and dump it into the latrine trench or manure pile beyond the house. Not exactly the glory of Valhalla, but necessary work nonetheless. This communal effort defines Viking Longhouse life. Everything is shared. Space, warmth, smells, responsibilities. You aren't an individual curled up in your own comfy corner of luxury. You're part of a larger organism. A loud, wheezing, straw-covered organism with questionable hygiene and an admirable tolerance for goat flatulence. And yet it works. No one's died of frostbite. Yet. No one's thrown a turnip in frustration. Yet. You've all made it through another night together, soot-stained and mosquito-bitten, but intact. It's not glamorous. It's not comfortable. But it's home. The sky outside the longhouse remains dim. What passes for morning light here is really just a shift from dark gray to slightly less dark gray. Welcome to Viking winter, where the sun is a rare visitor and the night refuses to leave the party. It's not just cold outside, it's eternal. You've slept through what felt like 9 lifetimes, and yet it's still technically night. You're not alone in wondering if time still exists. Several people around you are yawning as though they've slept for centuries. Others are already gearing up for the day, stoking the hearth, chewing dried fish, adjusting wool tunics that have absorbed enough body odor to qualify as sentient beings. But all of this activity unfolds in that liminal space between night and day, a sort of twilight trance that defines life in the far north. The Viking world didn't operate on a strict 9-to-5 schedule, especially not during winter when daylight might last only 4 hours and your internal clock gives up entirely and starts making up new numbers. The longhouse adapts to this sluggish rhythm. You sleep when you can, rise when necessary, and live by firelight. That flickering orange glow becomes your sun, your entertainment system, your gossip circle, and your heating plan. It casts tall shadows and makes everyone's face look like they're about to share a ghost story. Which, by the way, they probably are. Because during these endless winter nights, the Norse didn't just sleep and grunt and eat porridge. They told tales, stories of gods and giants, heroes and betrayal, and, of course, terrifying creatures that definitely lived in the woods outside your house. You sip warm broth from a carved wooden cup, watching as the old man with the twisted beard gestures dramatically, retelling the story of the Draugr, the undead Viking who rises from his burial mound to protect his treasure. The firelight dances in his eyes as he leans in, describing the cold breath of the Draugr creeping down the longhouse hallway. Someone giggles nervously. Someone else scoots closer to the fire. You try not to glance toward the shadowy corner behind the ox stall. Historians still debate how much of Norse mythology was shared in everyday settings like the longhouse, and how much was reserved for ritual occasions. But one thing is clear, storytelling was central. It passed on values, history, entertainment, and more than a few sleep-disrupting mental images. The long, dark winter was the perfect backdrop. Time stretched out like taffy. Hours blurred into days. There were no clocks, no strict sense of when night ended and day began. Just cycles of light, fire, and conversation. And sometimes deep, luxurious boredom. You huddle deeper into your blanket, half listening to a story about Thor getting tricked into drinking the ocean when someone opens the door. It's a mistake. A brutal gust of wind slams into the room like an angry ghost wielding 1,000 tiny icicles. Everyone flinches, someone yells, a chicken flutters into the air in full panic. The person quickly slams the door shut and mutters an apology. The cold lingers, curling around your ankles like a vengeful cat. And just like that, the longhouse is reminded that beyond these wooden walls is a frozen, wind-whipped world that absolutely does not care how cozy your fire is. Someone stokes the embers again. More twigs, more kindling. Eventually, the glow returns. The fire is life, quite literally. Without it, this entire space turns into a refrigerated meat locker with sheep in it. The central hearth serves not only as a heat source, but as a light anchor. Everyone orients around it. The closer you are, the better your night will be. Which brings us to another grim reality. Your current location? You're roughly 3 human bodies and 1 cow length away from the hearth. And it shows. Your blanket may be holding in some body heat, but your feet are dangerously close to Viking popsicle territory. You wiggle your toes to encourage circulation. 1 toe wiggles. The others send a formal resignation letter. You consider scooting closer to the hearth, but space is limited, and warm spots in the longhouse aren't given, they're earned, usually with age, respect, or possibly bribery involving smoked fish. The lucky few near the hearth get to sleep with their faces not frozen, and their dreams not interrupted by frost forming on their eyebrows. You're slightly warmer than a snowbank and twice as grumpy. Some families did construct wooden sleeping benches along the walls, lifting the sleeper off the cold floor and providing a bit of insulation from ground moisture. You eye one of those benches now, occupied by an elder, 2 furs, and a cat who looks like it pays taxes. Clearly, you're not getting that bench. Instead, You sit cross-legged in your own personal tundra patch, watching as the fire grows stronger and the longhouse pulses with life again. Children chase each other, weaving between legs and clucking hens. Someone begins sharpening a knife. Someone else complains about their back. The cow sighs dramatically and shifts her bulk closer to the fire. Of course she does. You're tempted to scoot closer, but then you remember the goat. The goat also wants the fire, and the goat does not negotiate. Historians continue to study how Norse households managed indoor climate. There's evidence of primitive insulation, turf-covered roofs, straw-stuffed walls, even animal skins hung over doorways. But these methods only did so much. The fire was essential, and during the coldest months, everything revolved around keeping it burning. The family's best wood is used sparingly. Twigs and peat might pad out the burn, but big logs are saved for particularly brutal nights. You quietly appreciate whoever got up earlier to tend it. Probably someone with arthritis and zero patience for cold knees. You inch a little closer, hoping the goat won't notice. It notices. You back off. Outside, the wind howls again. Inside, the longhouse hums. You breathe in smoke and stew and faintly sweaty wool. Your eyes water a little from the heat, or possibly the memory of stepping barefoot on that goat pellet earlier. And still it's dark. Still it's winter. Still, you're not quite sure what time it is. But you're here, and the fire is glowing. And your toes? One of them is almost warm again. Progress. Eventually, your body begins to adjust. You stop noticing the smell of wood smoke embedded in every fiber of your cloak. Your nose goes from cold to numb, and the parts of you that aren't stiff just feel pleasantly heavy. Maybe this is what acceptance feels like in a Viking longhouse. You shift your blanket again, and notice something moving under it. Not something alive this time, hopefully, but something crawling in your awareness. An itch, a tickle on your scalp, then another, and another. Oh no! Congratulations. You are now the proud host of the Viking bedtime classic, Lice. There's a reason that tiny combs are some of the most commonly found artifacts in Norse archaeological digs. Made from antler, bone, or wood and carved with absurd precision, they weren't decorative. They were tactical. Viking-age grooming was more than a matter of looking presentable. It was an all-out war against tiny six-legged insurgents. You reach into your tunic pocket. Yes, you sleep in your tunic. More on that later, and find a bone comb tucked in there. You drag it gently through your hair and frown at what you find. No need to panic. Everyone's got them. The lice, in many ways, are the true longhouse residents. Even the sagas mention hygiene. Vikings were surprisingly clean by medieval standards. They bathed weekly on Laugardagur, or washing day, which eventually became Saturday. They cared for their hair, trimmed their beards, and swapped tips on the best oils for greasing their combs. But in a longhouse packed with pee-up blankets and animals, personal grooming was more like defensive driving than complete control. Someone hands you a wet rag to wipe your face. It's warm, possibly from being dipped in broth water. You're not asking questions. You accept it gratefully and begin rubbing the soot from your cheeks. It only sort of works. You mostly just rearrange the grime. You glance around. Everyone else is doing the same. There's a kind of communal grooming session happening. People combing their hair, picking straw from each other's sleeves, checking under the furs for missing socks or children. Someone is helping braid someone else's hair. Someone else is oiling their beard using what appears to be rendered bear fat. The smell is motivational. Layered clothing was the name of the game in the Norse world, and your current getup is textbook. A linen undertunic, a heavier wool overtunic, leg wrappings, socks if you're lucky, and some form of cloak or mantle. You slept in all of it, because stripping down at night would be an open invitation for frostbite to waltz in and make itself at home. You shuffle your cloak closer around you and reach down to adjust the wool wrappings around your feet. One is bunched, the other is wet. You don't ask why. Historians still argue about the materials used in Viking clothing, what was reserved for daily life versus ceremonial wear. But one thing's agreed upon: wool was everything. You didn't survive Scandinavian winters in cotton. You wore sheep. And those sheep, they worked. Coats were turned into tunics. Skins became boots. Hides lined bedding. The blanket draped over your legs may have belonged to old Bessie from last spring. She was a good sheep. She deserved better. The lice, of course, didn't care. Wool, linen, hair, they treated all of it as prime real estate. That's why grooming wasn't just a personal ritual. It was a team sport, a matter of morale. You'd sit around the fire, chatting, eating, and picking through each other's hair like a family of extremely large and slightly embarrassed monkeys. You tug your tunic collar and inspect the inside seam. Yep, Lice City. You give it a good shake near the fire and watch a few tiny black dots leap into oblivion. You silently hope the goat eats them. Someone passes you a small clay pot with something thick and waxy inside. Lard, you guess. Mixed with pine tar, maybe? It smells like regret, but promises warmth. You scoop a bit and rub it between your palms, then pat it along your scalp and beard. It's greasy, yes, but it creates a barrier. Lice hate it. So do most people with functioning noses, but you make sacrifices. In the Viking Longhouse, vanity is for summer. You settle back, slightly shinier than before. Across the fire, another man is vigorously combing his child's hair while telling a story about a sea serpent that ate a fisherman whole. The child is either enthralled or asleep, possibly both. You reach down and scratch at your knee. That one's not lice. That's just a poorly placed bit of straw that's been exfoliating your skin all night. You toss it aside and try to resettle. Comfort is not the goal here. Warmth is. You wrap your cloak tighter, press your feet against your neighbors, and lean gently into the person beside you. That's just how it works. If you want to survive, you share heat. Your personal bubble? It popped the moment you stepped inside this longhouse. There's a closeness here that's hard to describe. A gritty intimacy. Everyone's in the same boat, or longhouse as it were. Everyone itches, everyone smells, everyone's hair is a little too wild and their eyes a little too tired. But there's a quiet camaraderie in it. You sit in the warmth, surrounded by the crackle of fire, the soft scratching of combs, the occasional chicken cluck, and the shared knowledge that this is how you live, bundled, oiled, and occasionally gnawed on by tiny insects. It's not glamorous, it's not hygienic in the modern sense, but it's real. And sometimes it even feels a little like love. The longhouse doesn't quiet down during the night, it settles. There's a difference. It's not that the noise stops, it's that it reshapes itself into a background lullaby of communal chaos. As you lie there again, attempting to stretch without kicking anyone's ancestor, you begin to notice the sounds, and they are something else. Snorts, that's the first layer. Human, animal, it's a choir of nostrils. Deep, wet, rhythmic exhales from the ox in the corner, the old man 3 bodies down, and that one dog with sleep apnea who's currently using a fur pelt as a pillow. Next come the wheezes, subtle at first, then wheezy cough chokes that suggest someone should maybe stop sleeping with their face buried in goat hair. You hear someone murmur in their sleep, something about turnips and betrayal. Honestly, you relate. Then, the groans, the shuffling, the deep, exhausted exhales of people shifting position on beds made of regret. You hear someone mutter a soft ow in Old Norse. You're pretty sure you just heard a knee pop from 6 feet away. These aren't interruptions. These are the lullaby of Viking life. There's something comfortingly cyclical about it. Snuffle, shuffle, sigh, repeat. But not all noises are bodily. Across the longhouse, tucked behind a hanging pelt that doesn't quite touch the floor, 2 elders begin telling stories. Their voices are low, scratchy with age, like the soft tearing of parchment. You can't catch every word, but the rhythm is hypnotic. They're telling the saga of a warrior who married a troll, which somehow involves turnip theft, a magic ring, and a goat that speaks only in riddles. Classic bedtime material. Everyone listens, not directly, no one turns to face them, but you can feel the stillness. Even the children go quiet. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're memory, culture, the best kind of sleep aid. Historians still debate whether sagas were recited nightly or reserved for special gatherings. What's clear is that storytelling was foundational, and why not? When your evenings are 17 hours long and the only other option is staring into a smoking fire while someone sneezes on your feet, a good troll love story is practically high art. The voice fades, another picks up, this one younger, more animated. A girl telling a tale of a sea monster that could only be defeated with flatbread and bravery. You smile. The fire crackles. Somewhere, a chicken makes a sound like a sneeze. You drift, and then, just when you think your body might allow you to fall asleep again, someone starts snoring. Not gently, not politely. No, this is a full-throated, echoing, chest-rattling groan snore, like a dying walrus trying to learn the flute. It's relentless, rhythmic, vibrating the very foundation of the Longhouse. It's Uncle Halvar. You know it, everyone knows it. Even the ox sighs in annoyance. You shift your blanket over your head. That doesn't help. The snoring goes through you. You could write music to it, if you were feeling generous. Someone across the room tosses a pebble. It bounces off something with a soft thwack. The snoring pauses, then starts again, louder, with vengeance. You try counting sheep, except the sheep are literally here, and they keep standing up and sitting down in odd rhythms. It's deeply distracting. You try focusing on the fire, on its soft flicker, the way it throws shadows against the beams above. It dances like an old man telling stories with his hands. It's nice, peaceful, until the goat snorts directly into your ear. You flinch, then sigh, then laugh, because what else can you do? This is Viking sleep, a sensory mosaic of creaking wood, low conversation, the occasional fart, and someone in the far corner playing a soft, badly tuned lyre. Possibly to drown out Halvar, possibly just for atmosphere. Either way, it's oddly soothing. Even the oddest sounds become part of the pattern. The cow shifting, a bucket being moved, someone scratching furiously at their arm, a whisper, a yawn. The lyre plays on, a few uncertain notes, a pause, then more. It's like lullaby jazz. You stretch again, cautiously. The floor is unforgiving, but your body's too tired to care. You curl into yourself. Your blanket crackles slightly as it settles. You close your eyes. Someone starts singing, a soft chant in a dialect you don't recognize. The voice is deep, male, barely above a whisper. It's not a song, really, more like a melodic prayer. Maybe it's for sleep, maybe it's to ward off dreams, or maybe it's just what he does when he can't stand Halvar's snoring. You listen. You let the sound wrap around you like another layer of fur. This is what Viking night is. It's messy, it's loud, it's full of elbows and ghost stories and strange smells. But it's alive, shared, held together by breath and straw and stories. And eventually, despite everything, your eyes begin to close. The chant fades, the fire pops, even Halvar softens into a quiet snore purr, and you drift, not into silence, but into something better, into a noise that belongs to you. You wake slowly, and not because someone shook you or a rooster screamed in your face, though both are entirely plausible scenarios here. No, this is that strange in-between kind of waking, where you're not quite sure if you were dreaming about trolls or just overheard another saga about them in your sleep. Your blanket is half on the floor, half wrapped around your neck like a wool snake. Bjorn is, of course, using your arm as a pillow again. His tiny fists have a grip like a berserker in training. You manage to extract yourself with the precision of a man trying to rob a goose. You sit up, blinking, groggy, still wrapped in the smells of smoke, wool, and boiled cabbage. Someone has thrown more fuel on the hearth, so the fire crackles now with genuine enthusiasm. The shadows that haunted the beams in the night have softened to gentle flickers. You feel the warmth lick at your toes. Finally. You stretch again, because every muscle seems to have quietly dislocated itself in the protest sometime around midnight. Then you remember what you dreamed. You dreamed of a longboat, sailing through fog. On board, your entire longhouse was there. Halvar snoring on a pile of fish nets, the ox wearing a crown, and Bjorn manning the rudder with a sausage. You don't want to read into it too much. Dreams in Viking society weren't just background noise. They could be omens, visions, or even a type of spiritual messaging. Historians still argue whether dreams were interpreted by shamans or just considered dinner hallucinations from bad mead, but either way, dreams held weight. If you had one vivid enough, someone might call in the vulva, a seeress, to explain what it meant. Though in your case, she'd probably just recommend less goat cheese before bed. Speaking of food, someone hands you a cup, warm and slightly sticky. Mead. Just a sip. It's not quite breakfast, not quite medicine. It's more like dream fuel, a little morning courage. You take a sip. It's sweet, smoky, faintly herbal. The kind of drink that makes your brain say, why not build a ship today? You lie back for a moment, savoring the taste in the stillness, and then someone starts talking about the hulde folk, the hidden people. You're not sure who started it, but the conversation weaves through the house like steam rising from soup. They're whispering now, because that's how you talk about the unseen, about the elves and land spirits that dwell just beyond the edges of this reality. They live in rocks, trees, hills. They hate noise, disrespect, and spitting indoors, apparently. Superstitions are the quiet architecture of Viking dreams. You sleep with a carved bone under your bed, not just for luck, but to keep the nightmares out. You place your boots facing the door, so wandering spirits don't get curious. And of course, you don't sleep with your head pointing north. That's how the dead lie. You glance over at the old man with the twisted beard. He's still awake, eyes wide, staring into the fire as though it owes him money. He mutters something about a dream where a wolf swallowed the moon. No one laughs, not because it's terrifying, though it is, but because someone else dreamed the same thing 2 nights ago. You shift your blanket again, and that's when you remember. Your dream ended with a voice. A woman's voice, whispering something in Old Norse that you somehow understood in your bones. Something about snow, and fate, and not eating the salted fish before a full moon. Was it just a dream, or did someone whisper to you while you slept? Or was it the house? Because the Longhouse feels alive sometimes. It groans, it breathes, it remembers, and it holds your sleep like a cradle made of timber and smoke. You glance up. The rafters look different now in the early morning light, less ominous, more weathered. You spot a carving you didn't notice before, a spiral, a figure, a symbol perhaps for protection, or for goats. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Someone chuckles nearby. They dreamt of falling through the ice and being rescued by a walrus with your face. You raise an eyebrow. They shrug. There's comfort in it all. These dreams, strange as they are, connect everyone. They're the shared theater of the Longhouse. No books, no mirrors, no privacy. But stories? You have endless. You hear someone humming, a woman maybe, low and steady as she stirs a pot. It's not a song you know, but it's one your bones seem to recognize. It blends into the crackling of the fire, the murmured conversations, the half-remembered dreams, and the faint, rhythmic cluck of a particularly judgmental hen. And in that moment, you understand something odd and wonderful. You don't need silence to sleep. You need continuity, a soft, humming world that never really stops moving, that cradles you in noise and warmth and memory. The Longhouse doesn't hush you to sleep. It sings you there. Sometimes it's with stories, sometimes with snoring, sometimes with Bjorn drooling on your knee, but always, always with dreams. You're awake now, sort of, the way you're technically awake at 5 a.m. on a cold Monday morning in February, where your eyes are open but your soul is still on the blanket, curled up in denial. Your joints have staged a quiet protest. Your hair is pointing in 7 different directions. And your breath? Let's just say that if Thor himself were sitting next to you, he might politely reposition his hammer. But what's worse than your breath is the temperature. The fire, your beloved hearth companion, has burned down again. Just embers now, dull and sullen, barely pulsing with life. And as the fire goes out, the cold begins to creep back in. Not like a sudden slap of winter wind, but like a whisper, a slow, creeping sensation that your feet are no longer part of your body, and your nose is turning into a decorative icicle. Someone shuffles past you to throw more wood on the coals. You watch as sparks leap up hopefully, then fizzle. It'll take a while for the warmth to return. In the meantime, you pull your blanket tighter around you and stare at the dying glow, like it owes you warmth and hasn't paid rent in days. And then it happens. The cold. The real cold. That kind of Scandinavian frost that doesn't just nip at your toes. It settles into your bones like an uninvited guest. Your breath fogs. Your blanket begins to feel like decorative paper. The Longhouse, once full of snoring and twitching and the occasional turnip-based dream, grows still. Everyone feels it. The silence that happens when your body enters preservation mode. The walls do nothing. They're thick, yes, timber lined with turf, mud, maybe some sheep dung for insulation flare. But the wind doesn't care. It slides in through the seams. It finds your ankles, your knees, the back of your neck. It makes you pull your cloak over your head like a turtle hoping to disappear. Historians often point out that the fire in a Viking longhouse was central, literally and socially. But it wasn't perfect. Without chimneys, the smoke often filled the upper half of the space, leaving the air down below cold, wet, and rich in that unforgettable, "you've been gently smoked overnight" aroma. You try to scoot closer to the fire again, but space is limited. The prime real estate near the hearth is occupied by elders, the sick, and the family dog who somehow always gets the best spot. You're still near the door, the drafty end, the "did someone forget to patch that hole in the wall?" end. You curl tighter, wrapping your cloak around your legs and hoping the goat doesn't mistake you for bedding. Again. The fire coughs, sparks flicker, and then someone stirs. An old man with a face like tree bark and a blanket over his head. He rises slowly and moves to the fire with ritual precision, poking, arranging, coaxing the flame back into life. The crackle returns, timid but faithful. You feel a gentle wave of warmth sweep across the floor like a first sigh of spring. But it doesn't reach you, not yet. You rub your hands together, slap your arms for circulation, and begin the dance of the cold foot shift, a Viking tradition in which you tuck one foot under your thigh to warm it up, then switch to the other when the first goes numb. Repeat until sunrise or frostbite, whichever comes first. Someone sneezes, loudly. Another person mutters about getting the winter nose. You don't ask. The cold becomes personal. It finds the seam in your tunic, the gap between your collar and your neck, the small strip of skin exposed between your sock and your leg wrap. It is intimate. You look over to see a woman wrapping her infant in layers of wool, fur, and pure maternal willpower. She tucks him against her chest beneath her cloak and rocks him rhythmically. The baby looks smug, warm, like he knows he won the sleeping arrangement lottery. You, meanwhile, consider starting a small fire just for your toes. It might be worth the risk. The longhouse begins to wake again, reluctantly. You hear someone cracking open a barrel, maybe to fish out a slab of cold dried meat or scoop fermented something from the bottom. A child sneezes. The dog barks once, then curls back up. You consider getting up, and then decide, no. The cold is at its worst just before the hearth revives, just before the walls stop leaking wind, just before the people start shuffling around again, generating heat with their presence and their muttered complaints about how much colder it was last year. Historians still argue whether the fire in a Viking longhouse was ever allowed to go out completely. Most evidence suggests it wasn't. Someone was always responsible for keeping the coals alive. If the hearth died, it took hours to get it going again. And in winter, that could mean sickness, or worse. You feel a flicker of envy toward the fire guardian, that quiet, patient soul who tends the flame in the middle of the night, not for thanks, but because it must be done. Because everyone else is sleeping in a barn-shaped freezer box, and the fire is the only thing keeping their eyebrows from icing over. More logs are added now, real ones, heavy, resinous. The flames surge, the heat spreads, and for the first time in what feels like decades, you uncurl your toes. They remember being human. You shift toward the fire, not too much, just a polite lean, enough to pretend you're still on your sleeping mat while absolutely poaching some stolen warmth. Someone else has the same idea. There's a slow migration, a general scooting. No one says anything. But gradually, every person within range edges 2 inches closer to the hearth like conspirators in a very cozy heist. And finally, the cold relents. Just a little, but enough. You sigh. Deep, so. The air you exhale is warmer than the one you inhaled. That feels like victory. Your blanket, once an indifferent sheet of wool, now traps warmth instead of despair. You can feel your face again. Your fingers, too. You are no longer a frostbitten ghost pretending to be a Viking. You are a mostly warm, semi-itchy human who survived the worst part of the night. Congratulations. You made it through the freeze. As warmth slowly returns to your limbs, you begin to notice something you were previously too cold to register. You smell terrible. It's not just you, of course. It's everyone. The longhouse has marinated overnight in a rich bouquet of body odor, smoky wool, and that one lingering bowl of fermented fish stew no one had the courage to clean up. The air itself is textured. You feel like you could chew it, and if you did, it would probably taste like feet and campfire. You run your tongue across your teeth. Mistake. They feel like they've been individually wrapped in felt. No toothbrush, no minty rinse, just the vague memory of chewing on dried fish and shouting over a snoring ox. You sit up straighter and instinctively smooth your tunic. It doesn't help. Your woolen sleeves smell like old beer and something you're not emotionally ready to identify. But nothing compares to your hair. You run your fingers through it cautiously, like one might investigate a suspicious fur pelt. It is stiff, clumped, and somewhere between damp and oily. Possibly both. It has clearly spent the night absorbing everything around you. Smoke, stew, and the ambient desperation of Viking winter. The smell is so potent it could be weaponized. You grab a handful of it and sniff experimentally. Regret. You glance around. Everyone else looks similarly crusty. Even the children, who seem immune to shame, are scratching their scalps and wrinkling their noses. A woman near the fire is attempting to finger comb her hair with a bone comb, pausing occasionally to inspect it like she's panning for lice. Speaking of which, yes, they're still here. You scratch the back of your neck. You think you made eye contact with one. In the corner, a teenage boy is dabbing a chunk of bear fat into his hair. He smooths it back with a grimace and a sense of purpose. The end result is less heroic warrior and more wet sheep cosplay. But in the Viking world, greasing your hair wasn't just a style choice. It was practical. It kept moisture out, it kept lice somewhat at bay, and perhaps most importantly, it glued your dignity together after a night of snoring into your own elbow. Historians agree that personal grooming mattered in Norse culture, especially for men. Appearances carried weight in Viking society, not just for the ladies at the mead hall, but for status, pride, and how many people took your story seriously. But when it came to breath, that's where things fall apart. You exhale again. Oh dear. Your morning breath smells like you've been chewing on a goat's sock. You want to apologize to everyone within a 5-foot radius, including the goat. There's no toothbrush, no mint. Some folks might have used twigs or even chewed birch bark to clean their teeth. You reach for a dry reed and make a half-hearted attempt. It feels like brushing your mouth with a broomstick. Someone offers you a mouthful of something sour, like liquid vinegar mixed with herbs and regret. You sip. It's a kind of early mouthwash, or punishment. Either way, it clears the back of your throat and gives you that good ol' I just gargled pain feeling. You blink. Your eyes are watery. Your sinuses are clear. And your breath now only smells mildly like despair. You watch as an old woman oils her hands with fish fat and rubs it into her skin like lotion. A man next to her smears soot under his eyes, muttering something about wind protection. And in the background, someone starts singing softly, their voice rough from sleep but oddly beautiful. The Longhouse is awake. Sort of. Everyone's still in their sleep tunics, long woolen garments that double as pajamas, casual wear, and possibly formal attire if you stand up straight enough. You didn't change before bed, because changing means undressing, and undressing means freezing to death. So you slept in your day clothes, and now you're starting the day in your sleep clothes. Time is meaningless. You are both well-dressed and completely feral. You sit by the fire and rub your hands together. They're grubby, smoke-stained, cracked around the knuckles. You scrape some soot from your palm with your fingernail. It comes off in a tiny black crescent, and you suddenly feel like you've been living inside a chimney. And your face, oh, your poor face. You reach for a bowl of water. It's cold, naturally, and murky, but it's your best bet. You splash it onto your cheeks with a gasp. The chill wakes you up more than coffee ever could. You scrub at your skin, half cleansing, half praying. There's no soap, just water, ash, and the friction of hope. You pat your face dry with the edge of your cloak, which is also dirty, but at this point, you're just rearranging filth. You run your hands through your hair again. It sticks. You try a comb. It snags. You give up. The Vikings may have been meticulous by medieval standards, but this morning, you're a lost cause. Across the hearth, a young man pulls out a carved bone ear scoop. Yes, really. Vikings used ear scoops. Clean ears meant clean hearing, which meant you didn't miss your chance to hear if someone was insulting your ancestors. Priorities. You, meanwhile, have found a piece of cloth in your pocket that could serve as a napkin, towel, or ceremonial flag, depending on how desperate you are. You wipe your nose with it and decide it's now officially a tissue. Historians still debate what kind of scents Viking homes carried, whether incense or herbs were used to mask smells. Some say sweetgrass or juniper might have been burned occasionally. But this morning there is no sweetgrass, only the lingering glory of human effort, goat wind, and the ever-present perfume of yesterday's stew. And yet, somehow, you adjust. Your body stops protesting. Your nose acclimates. You begin to own the smell. It is, after all, the smell of survival, of effort, of people living shoulder to shoulder, mouth to mouth, fume to fume in one long, smoke-drenched symphony of breath and grease. Your hair? Disgusting. Your breath? Devastating. Your clothes? Damp in morally confusing ways. But your heart is beating, the fire is alive, and Bjorn is finally not sitting on your arm. It's a beautiful morning. You stand up, slowly, carefully, like a man afraid of what might still be attached to his blanket. Your knees creak, your hips pop, your shoulders threaten mutiny, but you're vertical, and in the world of Viking Longhouse mornings, that's considered a small miracle. You stretch your arms overhead and feel a dozen small cracks ripple through your spine like someone stepping on a row of frozen twigs. A nearby child claps sarcastically. You bow. The goat nods in approval. And now, let's address your sleepwear, or more accurately, your daywear, which you also wore to sleep, which may or may not be stuck to your body in several strategic locations. In the Viking world, pajamas weren't a thing. Nightgowns, reserved for saints and possibly hallucinations. You slept in what you wore all day, or in deep winter, in more of what you wore during the day. Your base layer is a linen undertunic, simple, soft if you're lucky, and currently glued to your back with smoke, sweat, and mead residue. Over that, your heavier wool tunic, which was never washed, but frequently aired out in the sun to defunkifies it. The wool itches slightly, or it might just be the lice again. At this point, who can tell? Then the leg wrappings, long strips of wool wound around your calves like fabric snakes. They're supposed to keep your legs warm and protect against scratches. In reality, they've unwrapped themselves during the night and now resemble extremely lazy spaghetti. And socks. If you have socks, you are lucky. If you have dry socks, you're royalty. Your current socks are somewhere between damp and emotionally upsetting. You suspect one of them swapped feet during the night. You don't ask questions, you just shuffle on. You finally slip on your outer cloak, a heavy woolen thing that smells faintly of sheep, garlic, and generational trauma. You fasten it with a pin near the shoulder, like a toga, and immediately feel 10% more important, or at least more protected from the wind leaking through the wall seams like gossip. Historians note that Viking dress was both practical and symbolic. Your clothes told people who you were, your social standing, your wealth, your region. A silk trim. You knew a guy who knew a guy in Constantinople. Dyed wool? Congratulations, you can afford colors that didn't come from mud. You, however, are wearing 100% peasant core. Browns, grays, stains, possibly some mildew accents. Your cloak has a hole near the hem that you keep forgetting to patch. It's not fashion, it's survival couture. You glance around. The others are doing their own morning routines. A man tightens his belt, which does double duty as a utility strap. A woman pins up her hair and adjusts her shawl. Children scamper around wearing oversized tunics handed down through 5 cousins and possibly 2 cows. Everything here is layered. You wear clothes on clothes over more clothes until you're effectively wrapped like a Norse onion. It's how you survive the wind, and the stairs, and the goat-related accidents. But clothes aren't just garments, they're bedding, too. Last night, you slept in your cloak, using it like a blanket. That same cloak will soon be used as a rain cover, a tablecloth, or even a sack to carry firewood. Vikings loved a good multi-purpose item. Cloak by night, picnic blanket by day. Minimalism at its finest. Someone offers you a scrap of fur to line your boots. You accept gratefully and stuff it inside like you're adding emotional support to your toes. They respond by twitching back to life, probably wondering if this is heaven. A teenage girl nearby ties on a belt made of braided horsehair. It's stiff, functional, and surprisingly chic. You, however, are still using a rope. Not metaphorical. Actual rope. You tighten it and nod like that was a conscious choice and not a result of losing your real belt during that unfortunate latrine misadventure 2 weeks ago. Historians still debate how many layers the average Viking wore during winter. Some say 3, others insist 5 or more. All agree. Everyone was swaddled like burritos with trust issues. You grab your hood, a separate piece, worn for extra warmth, and pull it over your head. It's thick, wool, possibly lined with squirrel fur, or something that used to be a squirrel. Either way, it smells earthy, and now your ears aren't threatening to snap off like frozen leaves. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze bowl, just briefly, enough to see your wild hair, your soot-smeared cheeks, your slightly crooked tunic. You look like a wizard's apprentice who failed out of magic school but still insists on giving life advice. You nod in approval, because in the Longhouse, beauty standards are relative. You're dressed, you're warm, you're mostly lice-adjacent, not lice-infested. You're basically runway ready. Someone claps you on the back and hands you a chunk of cold barley bread. You take a bite. It's hard enough to cause dental trauma. You chew slowly, staring into the fire, savoring the quiet moment before chores begin. You're dressed for whatever the day throws at you. Rain, muck, firewood, or more turnips. You pull your cloak tighter and tuck your hands into your sleeves. It's not comfortable. It's not clean. But it's warm. And in a Viking Longhouse, that's victory. You're fully dressed, if wrapped in medieval survival gear counts as fully dressed, which, here, it does. Your limbs are moving again. Your socks have absorbed the chill and declared defeat. But there's one question on your mind as you clutch your half-frozen barley loaf. Why do you sleep in the corner while Grandma gets the warmest spot near the fire? Ah yes, the prestige spot, the inner circle, the hallowed zone within reaching distance of the hearth. It's toasty, it's draft-free. It's where dreams go to defrost. And you? You're about 6 human-shaped meat barriers away from that sacred warmth. Let's just say, you're still in the earning your stripes phase of Viking Longhouse living. You glance across the fire pit to see Grandma herself, a small, gnarled woman bundled in layers of fur, looking as serene as a sleeping walrus. Her feet are practically in the fire. She hasn't moved in hours. You're not even sure she blinks. But she's warm, and more importantly, she's earned it. In Norse society, elders were deeply respected. They held stories, wisdom, and possibly grudge collections older than the roof beams. If Grandma wanted the warm spot, you gave it to her. If Grandma took the warm spot, you thanked her for the opportunity to exist near her shadow. Historians suggest that sleeping arrangements were often based on a subtle social calculus: age, importance, household status, and, occasionally, whose blanket weighed the most. It wasn't written in stone, but you knew your place. You didn't argue with the woman who remembers the famine of '52 and can still outpace a goat uphill. Closer to the fire meant more than just warmth. It meant trust. It meant responsibility. The people nearest the hearth were also in charge of keeping it alive through the night. If they let it go out, everyone paid the price. So, while it looked like prime real estate, it came with the job description of Midnight Ember Wrangler. You, however, have been sleeping next to the door, also known as the icy corridor of regret. It's the coldest spot in the house, the first to welcome wind, the last to receive warmth. If someone gets up to use the bucket in the middle of the night, they trip over you. If the goat wanders in covered in snow, you get the first frosty snort in the face. But someone has to do it. And maybe, just maybe, one day you'll earn your way up the warmth ladder, one straw pile at a time. You pull your cloak tighter and scoot a bit closer to the fire, just enough to pretend you belong there, not enough to get kicked by Grandma. She opens one eye. You freeze. She closes it again. You live another day. Across the fire, a man rearranges a pile of blankets and sits down with a soft grunt. He's new to the warm zone too, judging by the way he keeps glancing around like he's expecting to be evicted. You nod at him. He nods back. It's the universal greeting of, hey, we may not be cold right now, but we're still emotionally cold on the inside. Then of course there's Halvar. Halvar is not old enough to be at the fire. Halvar has not earned the spot near the fire, but Halvar snores loud enough to shake rafters, and no one wants to sleep near him. So they've shoved him to the middle, hoping the fire would burn the noise out of him. It hasn't worked. He's currently lying on his back, arms splayed, mouth open, like a bear that lost a fight with a tankard of mead. You sip from your wooden cup, lukewarm broth now. The fire cracks. You can finally feel your toes. And of course, now it's time to move. Because while you're enjoying your moment in the near fire zone, someone needs the space. A mother holding a fussy toddler approaches, and with that silent understanding forged from many cold winters, you give her your warm rock and return to the outskirts. You are once again a resident of the draft zone, TM, but you're okay with it, because deep down, you know you're still young, still spry, sort of, and the warm spot must be earned. It's a rite of passage, a generational hierarchy enforced not with law, but with soft nudges and deeply passive-aggressive coughs. You return to your corner, stomp your feet for circulation, and settle onto your pile of semi-compressed straw. It greets you like an old enemy, lumpy, cold, but familiar. You look back at the fire, at Grandma, at the snoring Halvar, at the toddler who is now warm and babbling into his mother's ear. There's a quiet pride in it. The fire doesn't just warm individuals, it centers the whole house. It organizes the chaos, and those closest to it, by status, by role, or by sheer snoring volume, carry more than just warmth. They carry responsibility. Historians still debate whether specific sleeping spots were passed down or earned each winter. But what's clear is that the fire symbolized more than heat. It meant belonging. You scratch your beard, adjust your cloak, and settle back into your corner with a resigned grin. One day, maybe you will have the warm spot. One day, the corner will belong to someone else. One day, Bjorn will sleep by the door, and you'll be there, wrapped in fur 2 inches from the fire, snoring like royalty. But for now, you're just happy your socks aren't wet anymore. You're almost used to it now, this drafty, smoky, sleep-deprived life inside the belly of a longhouse. But today is different, because last night was a feast, and this morning, it's a hangover, not just yours, everyone's. You roll over and immediately regret it. Your head throbs like you were headbutted by a celebratory goat. Your mouth tastes like a mixture of dried fish, regret, and possibly someone else's turnip beer. You can still feel mead sloshing in your stomach, gently reminding you that no one told it when to stop. You open one eye. A mistake. The fire is bright, the longhouse is loud, and someone, for reasons unknown and entirely unforgivable, is tuning a lyre. Badly. You sit up slowly, like a corpse trying to negotiate resurrection. Your joints pop, your spine complains, your cloak has become tangled around your legs in a way that suggests it gained sentience sometime in the night and tried to escape. You blink at the carnage around you. Half the house is still asleep. The other half is moving like zombies through porridge. Someone's lost a boot. Someone else is using a bucket as a pillow. A man 2 feet from you is muttering something about a dream he had, where Odin turned into a goose and stole his trousers. You nod respectfully. A feast in a Viking longhouse was no small affair. The fire burned all night. The mead flowed like ambition. There were songs, games, and at one point, someone attempted to ride the ox. You look across the fire pit and spot the ox. It looks personally offended. Fair. Remnants of celebration still linger. Bits of roast meat cling to the edges of plates. Bones scattered near the benches. A single fish head rests in someone's hood. You hope they notice before putting it on. And then there's the smell. Feast aftermath is a unique kind of funk. It's like regular longhouse odor, but turbocharged by ale, sweat, old meat, and somebody's digestive regrets. You inhale, you cough, you reach for the nearest cup, praying it holds water. It does not. You give up and drink it anyway. Historians still debate how often Viking feasts occurred. Some were reserved for seasonal festivals or religious rites, others just for good old-fashioned, we didn't all die this month celebrations. But they all ended the same way. A house full of groaning, dehydrated humans trying to remember where they left their dignity. The lyre player plucks another note. It twangs like a nervous chicken. You squint at them. They grin. Their eyes are far too bright for this hour. It's either their first hangover or their 100th. You whisper a prayer for silence, but the gods are busy. Bjorn is awake. Of course he is. Children, like goats in shame, are immune to hangovers. He's happily chewing on a piece of stale bread, wearing one of your boots and singing a very off-key version of the troll song from last night. You bury your face in your hands. There's no medicine, no aspirin, just time, water, and possibly chewing a piece of birch bark if you're desperate enough. Someone offers you a leftover bit of salted fish. You wave it away like it's a live snake. Your stomach grumbles, or growls. Either way, it's angry. You shift in your bedding, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt. There isn't one. Your back feels like it lost a fight with a tree. Your head throbs in rhythm with the lyre. You're cold, somehow sweating, and you've got what may be goat hair stuck to your cheek. You look around. You are not alone. Everywhere, people nurse their own quiet suffering. A woman is lying completely flat, staring at the ceiling like it holds answers. A man has wrapped himself in 2 cloaks and is muttering an apology to Thor. Someone else is trying to light the fire using only sheer willpower. You all made choices last night, and now the Longhouse pays the price. One of the elders shuffles toward the fire with a pot. A miracle. Something hot, something brothy, something vaguely edible. The smell is smoky, fatty, and slightly sour. It might be soup, it might be punishment. You take a cup, you sip, you instantly feel 10% less like a walking corpse. Not good, not even okay, but functional. And in the Viking world, that's as close to healed as anyone ever gets. The lyre player, sensing they are seconds away from being launched into a snowbank, switches to a lullaby. It helps, slightly. You stare into the fire, cupping the hot broth in your hands, letting the warmth bleed into your fingers. The Longhouse breathes with you, slowly, gently. There's a shared understanding here, a communal hangover. No one's being productive, no one's judging. You exist, collectively, in a fog of overindulgence and underhydration. But underneath it, there's something sweet. You remember laughing last night, real, full belly laughs. You remember someone dancing badly. You remember someone else giving a speech about how stew changed their life. And you remember feeling, just for a moment, like you belonged. This is Viking life too. Not just hardship, not just cold, but celebration, laughter, music. Even if the music was aggressively bad and the mead turned your stomach into a haunted cave. You finish your broth. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve. You survive another moment. Halvar groans loudly in the corner. Someone throws a piece of bread at him. You smile. The Longhouse stirs. Groans become movement. Movement becomes the start of another day. And you're alive, hungover, slightly greasy, possibly possessed by whatever spirit is hiding in your left boot, but alive. The morning sun, if you can call that watery smear of pale light sun, filters faintly through the smoke holes above, painting the Longhouse in streaks of grayish gold. You're still huddled on your straw bedding, but something's shifted. You've done it. You've survived your first full night and morning, and possibly minor spiritual trial, in a Viking Longhouse. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. Your tunic is both damp and crusty. You've formed an emotional bond with your cloak, which now smells like sweat, soup, and identity. But you're upright, breathing, even managing a wobbly smirk. All things considered, that's a win. You shuffle toward the fire again, hands out, palms up, like a penitent pilgrim approaching the warmth gods. The flames flicker, brighter now, fed by wood someone split while the rest of you were busy moaning about mead and regretting the third helping of smoked herring. The fire doesn't judge. It accepts you with a welcoming hiss and crackle. You crouch beside it, soaking in the warmth, half listening to the morning murmur of life around you. A pot simmers. A child sings. A man curses softly as he fumbles with frozen bootstraps. Even Halvar seems quieter, which is alarming in itself. You smile. It's not comfort, but it is familiarity. The Longhouse around you creaks and stretches, wood shifting in its joints like an old man easing out of bed. The rafters above hold soot and smoke and stories. The walls are lined with furs, baskets, tools, bundles of herbs, and the breath of generations. And the people? They're yawning, scratching, adjusting, not graceful, not elegant, but human, relatable, and unflinchingly here. Someone passes you a wooden bowl. Inside? A hearty scoop of barley porridge with a suspiciously chewy consistency and a few dried berries that must have cost someone a week's wages. You accept it like treasure. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth, the weight of it. Food in the Longhouse isn't just sustenance. It's the day's first anchor, something real, something grounding. After hours of dreams and drafts and ambiguous animal noises, it's a relief. You look around again. The longhouse is full of these tiny comforts, shared furs, whispered jokes, a mug passed hand to hand, a dog snoring into someone's boot. Every corner tells you you're not alone. It's not the kind of luxury modern folk dream about. No privacy, no hygiene, no central heating. Your mattress is straw, your neighbors are chickens, and someone just sneezed directly into the stew. But there's something deeper here. You slept through a night where temperatures dropped below freezing. You shared warmth with strangers. You listened to stories older than your language. You were part of a breathing, burping, scratchy quilt of people trying their best to stay alive through another Norse winter. And now, as the day stirs fully to life, you don't feel like a guest anymore. You're one of them. The fire grows stronger. You stretch your feet toward it. Your socks steam. That's probably fine. You glance across the room and see someone laughing, really laughing, as they retell a dream where they fought a sea troll using nothing but a spoon and their mother's apron. The others laugh too. Even Grandma's eye twitches in a way that might be a smile. And just like that, the cold doesn't seem quite so cruel. You sip the last of your broth. You pull your cloak around you like a badge of honor. You scratch your scalp with a sigh that somehow sounds content. Because this wasn't just a night, it was a passage. You slept in the smoke. You survived the goose. You may never be clean again, but you are, in the very best sense of the word, home. And now, dear listener, the longhouse grows quiet again. The voices fade to murmurs. The fire softens to a low, sleepy crackle. You've pulled your cloak around your shoulders, tucked your hands deep into the folds of warm wool. The straw under you, though still uneven, somehow feels more forgiving now. Familiar, like it knows your shape. Outside, the wind still howls, slow, steady, a lullaby wrapped in frost. The snow drifts against the heavy wooden walls, whispering through the seams, testing the strength of turf and timber. But in here, you're safe, surrounded, held. The cow sighs, deeply, somewhere behind you. A child's giggle turns into a yawn. A spoon is set gently into a bowl. Somewhere, just above your head, smoke coils lazily into the beams like a ghost settling in for a nap. And you're drifting. Your breath has slowed. Your body, wrapped in wool and soot and barley-scented dreams, is melting gently into the rhythm of this place. The ache in your legs, it doesn't matter now. The itch behind your ear, you'll deal with it tomorrow. Right now, you are simply here, one small soul tucked into the great breathing body of the longhouse. Let the darkness settle. Let the fire warm your toes. Let the soft noise of shared sleep carry you off. No fear, no frost, just the gentle hum of history wrapping you in its arms. Sleep well, weary traveler. Sleep like a Viking.